Money Arata. The digitization of currencies is coming to governments. Countries like Norway and Sweden have phased out cash notes, and many others are following suit. But not only that, governments are also creating their own digital money known as CBDCs, central bank digital currency. With CBDCs, not only cash will cease to exist, a new 100% national digital currency will be created, taking advantage of some of the innovations brought about by cryptocurrencies. Well, that's good, isn't it? Finally, governments are modernizing. It seems that now our life will be more practical, will have more benefits. Wrong. Government digital money is a tool to reduce individual rights. It is a tool for social monitoring and control, and it is part of the war on cash. CBDC projects have been touted around the world as more efficient ways to raise more taxes and increase government power. Please note, this is not financial service. Please read the full disclaimer before proceeding. Virtually all countries in the world tax income and various financial transactions and use the interest rate to stimulate or discourage economic activity. With the digitization of money, it has become much easier to track and collect taxes on every financial transaction. In the past, for example, you filled out a paper form declaring your assets and expenses in the income tax. If you said you paid the equivalent of $100 a month for your children's schooling and that payment was made in cash, it was very difficult for the government to check everything. If you made a transaction and you didn't even declare it, it was almost impossible to collect taxes. That is, it is very difficult to control cash transactions. In addition, paper money is not directly influenced by the interest rate. If the government imposes negative interest rates, it can force people to withdraw the money invested in government bonds and other fixed income investments to make them invest in the real economy or simply spend that money. With paper money, this control is not as direct or immediate. That is why governments hate paper money and they wage war on cash. When money is in digital form, in banks, the government's power to tax increases. In the case of taxes, for example, government systems practically monitor financial transactions that are carried out electronically, whether by bank transfer or credit card or debit card. In many cases, the tax collection is done in an automated way. There is no way to escape. Now, imagine if all transactions in a country were done like this. From the purchase of your coffee to the acquisition of a multinational, the government would have even more control over when, how much, and how you spend every penny of your money. But it is clear that the rulers do not admit this. They always say that digitizing money will bring more security, it will fight terrorism, it will prevent money laundering. But what will actually happen is greater government control over your money. Creating CBDC is a way for the government to try to appropriate the advantages of cryptocurrencies to decrease your financial freedom. As we have already mentioned in the other episodes of the Money Arata series, Bitcoin was created after the 2008 crisis and it has a very strong ideological principle behind it. The principle of giving people sovereignty over their own money. The money you earn from your work should be yours alone. There shouldn't be people telling you how you can or you can't spend your money, saying you're forbidden to send money for this or that purpose, saying that during certain hours of the night you can't handle your own money. But above all, there should be someone with the power to arbitrarily issue more and more currency, devaluing your money, the money you worked so hard to get. This is what motivated the creation of Bitcoin as a private currency and without a central authority behind it. Governments want to create their own cryptocurrencies to further enforce how you use your money, to charge even more taxes and even more control your incentives to save or spend. This is where CBDCs, the digital currencies issued by central banks, come in. There is still no defined concept of what CBDCs are, as no country has yet managed to implement this idea on a large scale. But you can think of CBDCs as the government creating a 100% digital currency, but with a central authority dictating the rules. What authority? The government itself. You might wonder what the point of creating a new currency would be if the government already has the authority to issue the traditional currency. The answer is in one word: control. By creating a 100% central bank controlled digital currency from scratch, the government will have complete and absolute control over every penny or every transaction carried out in the history of that currency, from the very first penny spent on launch day to the end of time, identifying day, time, location, value, issuer, and receiver of each transaction. With such control, the government completely dominates its money. Imagine the size of the political and economic power that such a currency provides. If you're fined, the government can automatically withdraw the money from your account. If you participate in demonstrations, you can have your money frozen. If you are on a certain lockdown and if you try to spend your money far away from your home, your money doesn't work. You should only spend your money in authorized stores. It is a dystopian scenario with enormous power of control being implemented through centralized money. CBDCs are advertised as something advantageous and modern for people, but in practice it breaks with the two great characteristics of cryptocurrencies brought by Bitcoin: decentralization and privatization. Bitcoin is decentralized because it doesn't have an authority dictating the rules. And Bitcoin is private because it was not created or funded or maintained by any government. It is a private initiative. It is maintained by the network of users that make up Bitcoin. While the blockchain of private cryptocurrencies is normally open so that everyone can see if the rules are being followed, in the case of a CBDC, the database can be closed. After all, the role of inspecting and controlling belongs only to the central authority. In China, the digital yuan is already being tested. In the second half of 2021, the Chinese CBDC moved no less than the equivalent of $8 billion. At the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, athletes were already able to use the digital yuan, which today is considered the most advanced CBDC in terms of implementation. But it is not just China that has the eye on this idea. The United States and the European Union also intend to launch the digital dollar and the digital euro. If all goes as governments hope, the trend is that CBDC in the future will completely replace traditional money. Only small purchases and informal trade use paper money. With 100% government-issued digital currency, the full transition will gradually take place until such time as everything is done with this new digital currency. And when that happens, get ready. What little control and privacy you had of your money will simply disappear. The war on cash is a way to fully implement this idea of negative interest. Control over basic interest rates in the economy is a way for governments to stimulate or discourage economic activity. When inflation is too high, the government raises the interest rate. With higher interest rates, people prefer to leave the money invested in government bonds or other fixed income investments to yield more. When the inflation is low and the government needs to heat up the economy, it does the opposite. They lower the interest rate. And with low interest rates, people have to invest in the real economy, in their own businesses or in stocks of publicly traded companies, or they prefer to use the money to buy products and services, since leaving it invested in government bonds or other fixed income investments will not bring any yield and may even generate losses. This all directly affects those who have government money in a bank, digitized. But what about those who have cash on paper outside of the financial system and far from the central reach? This is the government's main challenge on paper money: how to impose negative nominal interest rates on holders of paper money who are operating outside of the financial system, beyond the reach of the central bank. Today, governments are able to impose negative nominal rates to people who have money in the bank. The imposition is made by the central bank to the detriment of private banks, which pass negative interest rates to the account holders. This imposition is not without reaction. For example, in order to increase or at least protect the wealth of its pensioners, a pension fund in Switzerland even requested the redemption in cash of millions of Swiss francs to deposit the banknotes in safes. In a country with low inflation, at least that way money is protected from the negative interest rates that are imposed on bank investments. Even so, some banks simply denied that the owner of the money could withdraw the money itself. This example is an exception, but it shows that in practice we do not have real control over our own money. You know this well if you have ever tried to send an amount and had the operation denied by the bank, whether because of the amount, the person you're sending it to, the time, or any other reason. In Russia's war against Ukraine in 2022, the Russian financial system simply shut down by order of the government. The stock exchange was down for several days. Those who tried to withdraw money found the bank store closed, as it already happened, for example, in the Greek crisis in 2015. In these situations, instead of being a customer, you are held hostage by the bank and the government. The amounts that are deposited in the bank today are already digital state money. Only paper money is outside of this control. If CBDCs are successful and eliminate paper money, you're almost a hostage with no way out, as you will never be able to withdraw your money, your paper money, or to do whatever you want with it. The best way to protect yourself from the control of CBDCs is to transfer part of your equity to Bitcoin. With state money fully digitized, you become a hostage with almost no way out. By almost. Because you can still bet on Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created to give people back sovereignty over their own money. At the time, this was thought of as a form of protection against the government's power to just print more money without any kind of backing, devaluing the money you've worked so hard to earn. With CBDCs, this protection will become even more important. If, with cash, the government already has a lot of power on what you can do or you cannot do with your money, imagine when everything is digitized. The combination of central bank and legal tender laws that force people in a country to use government currency creates an endless cycle of government intervention in your money. With each crisis, the intervention gets bigger, and crises keep happening. Bitcoin solves most of these problems. Even though it is 100% digital, Bitcoin has a degree of privacy and freedom that are similar to what you get when you're using paper money. Transactions are encrypted and there are no internal rules about transfer limits, times for movement. You have complete control over your money. So whenever you hear that the government is going to create an official digital currency, don't believe that the main purpose is to fight terrorism, tax evasion, and money laundering. Don't think that it's to make your life easier, to bring innovations and advantages of Bitcoin to the government. No. CBDC, central bank digital currency, is a tool for social control and reduction of individual freedoms. Bitcoin solves this and protects your freedom and property rights, which is why it is so important for you to learn how to use Bitcoin in practice. Paper money makes life difficult for the government because it is harder to track, control, and collect taxes. When a government says that it will create a digital state currency, the speech is to combat terrorism and money laundering, but in practice the result can be more control, more taxes on your money. To protect yourself from this, consider transferring some of your money to Bitcoin. With a decentralized cryptocurrency and with no central authority, you can defend yourself against government abuses over the money you worked for. But don't just go out and buy Bitcoin randomly without knowing what you're doing. First, you need to understand how it all works. For those of you who are interested in knowing more about this, I invite you now to attend a special class of the Diamond Hands course by going to the address arata.tc/diamondhands.